historia del metal.
Have you got anything in common with Iron Maiden?
I hope not.
A mediados de los 80, los Thrashers y los melenudos se encontraban en guerra. Los Thrashers buscaban conquistar a los fanáticos, los melenudos a las listas de popularidad. Una banda probó que las canciones pueden ser metal y al mismo tiempo patear a algunos traseros.
Guns N' Roses were street, they were tough, they could rap blazing around one of their little baby fingers. They were the real deal. They were like the flip side of Sunset Strip. They weren't all glammed up and pretty, and they were kind of rough around the edges.
Well, 1987 was very good for these guys. This is the first video from Guns N' Roses. Here's Welcome to the Jungle.
Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games.
This wasn't one of those manufactured bands where they get a bunch of guys together because of the way they look. This is guys who hung out together and probably hated each other a lot of the time, but they were going to make the kind of music that made sense to them.
Nacidos de las cenizas de dos bandas, Hollywood Rose y LA Guns, Guns N' Roses, representan a las estrellas del underground. Pero fue la última adición al grupo lo que consolidó el sonido de Guns N' Roses.
We ran an ad for a heavy metal punk glam guitarist, blues influenced. And Slash showed up and we said, nah. But he kept popping up everywhere we were at, and all of a sudden we started working together.
I still remember to this day the first time I heard Guns N' Roses demos given to me in 1986 by their manager, who said to me, see what you think of these. I've agreed to manage them, but I really don't know why, because they're not going anywhere.
En 1987 lanzaron Appetite for Destruction. Vendieron 15 millones de copias del álbum, un récord para cualquier debut. Pero al principio las ventas eran lentas y Guns N' Roses casi eran desconocidos.
I was actually with Guns N' Roses in San Francisco when they supported the Cult, when the album broke into the top 100. Let's put it into perspective. This is Appetite for Destruction. It had just broken into the top 100. And they were overwhelmed. They were so delighted.
Their first album came out in 1987, and nothing happened. It wasn't until they went on tour with Aerosmith in 1988 that Sweet Child of Mine was released, and the whole thing exploded. People in Aerosmith still complain about how their opening act was bigger than they were.
Appetite for Destruction is the best rock record of the 80s. That record was so good that it was very common to hear people say things like, well, I hate metal, but I like this Guns N' Roses record. And it was one of the rare times where that happened, and the people who really did like metal didn't decide they were going to turn on that band for their success.
They came up with this sound that somehow, I mean, even Metallica fans knew this was an edgy sound. Because it was rock that actually rocked really, really, really hard.
Y para hacerlos aún más interesantes estaba el aspecto volátil del grupo, asociados con historias de drogas, peleas y conflictos internos. Eso agudizó la atracción del público. Y GNR garantizaba llenos cada noche.
On stage, you knew you were going to get a show that was very unpredictable, because you didn't know if you were going to get one song or you were going to get 10 songs. And if there was something that got under the craw of Axl, he would tell it.
We never know how we're going to end the show. We never know if we're going to do an encore or if I'm going to get pissed off and leave. Because something always happens at the end of a show for me, for some reason.
But when Axl was on, he was the greatest frontman in the world.
for a lot of people, that was part of the fascination, was that Axl Rose was danger personified.
Gina appealed to all the sections. There was enough glam about them for the girls to love what they were doing. There was enough streetwise attitude and hard riffing for the metal fans to think they're cool. They covered all the bases without realizing it.
En 1991, Guns N' Roses lanzó el largamente esperado álbum doble Use Your Illusion 1 y 2 para enormes hordas de fanáticos y consolidó su estatus como la banda más importante del metal. Pero G&R no eran los únicos que sacudirían al público con música nueva e innovadora.
Guns N' Roses were making their Use Your Illusions is sort of like down the street, and when we were making the Black album, it was a lot of fun coming back from the studio with the mixes and check this out, what we were working on the last couple of days, and Slash pulls out, hey, check what we were working on, and you know, it was a lot of fun.
Justo cuando Guns N' Roses cerraba la brecha entre el underground y el público pop metalero, Metallica estaba a punto de hacer lo mismo con el álbum que tomó su sonido hardcore y lo mezcló con algo más pop.
I remember being in Paris with Metallica just as the Black Album was coming out. And they just said, look, you can play speed metal forever, but ultimately someone's going to come over and say, we can play faster. You know, the point of it is not to be the fastest guy in the universe. The point of it is to make the hardest and most enduring music you can.
Everything had become very exaggerated. The Black Album became an answer to, wait a minute, we got to simplify this and bring it back down to something a little more tangible. Black Album became slightly more accessible. At the same time, the whole mainstream rock audience were kind of shifting out in the direction of where we were. All of a sudden, it was like, whoa.
Black Album llegó al primer lugar. Vendió más de 14 millones de copias en el mundo. Junto con Guns N' Roses, Metallica logró que el sonido del metal llegara a la fama mundial. Pero los fanáticos no estaban contentos con el éxito múltiple de Metallica, con las canciones simples y su postproducción.
I hated it. I thought it was a sellout. I thought it sucked. I thought it was this is not a Metallica record. This is blasphemy.
Kids like smashing them and like, this is not Master of Puppet. You know, like, it's because their love is so intense that the next thing is their hate can be so intense at the same time.
When you're part of a movement and a scene, and you're there when it's in its infancy and it's in the underground, and then all of a sudden your sister who was listening to Duran Duran wants to borrow your Metallica Black album, you're like, whoa, and you reassess whether what you love so much is still cool.
I'm proud of the fact that we've always had the balls to go where we wanted, when we wanted. There was never a kind of like, now we have to play up to this or these people or whatever. And I think we've always been pretty open about that. And if you want to be part of the ride, come take the ride. But we're not going to start, you know, altering the course for somebody else.
I've heard people say sell out when they talk about Metallica. But then I hang out with Lars, and he's like, yeah, we sold out. We sold out every night. You know? And that's a fact. I've never seen him not play to a sold-out place.
Heavy, la historia del metal.
Public Enemy was my favorite rap group. I always just wanted to work with those guys, but how?
We were abrasive. Anthrax was abrasive. And, you know, we throttled it to the edge.
Heavy, la historia del metal.